Hey Isaac, how are you?
Hi, Jason. I'm doing great. How about
Uh,
you?
well,
All things
uh,
considered.
yeah, exactly. All things considered, we're all hanging in there.
Yeah.
I wanted to first off thank you so much for taking some time to talk to me today. Share what you guys are working on at R2C. I want to congratulate you on applying to and being accepted onto Startup Row. This is one of our most competitive application cycles that we've had yet. Obviously, due to the ongoing public health emergency that is affecting the whole planet, um, you know, the PyCon organizers made the decision that the in-person PyCon is going to be canceled for what I hope is very obvious reasons. Um, but what we wanted to do is still give companies that were going to be presenting on Startup Row an opportunity to share what they're working on with the broader Python community. And I'm really excited to ask you a little bit about yourself, about R2C, where you guys are at, where you guys are going, and how the sort of everybody who's listening to this are going to be able to help you out. So,
Sounds great.
without further ado, who are you and what are you working on?
Yeah, for sure. So my name's Isaac. I'm one of the co-founders at R2C. And for us, the story starts, I guess, back at MIT with my roommate and hallmate. We were always really interested in security stuff. My roommate's advisor was Ron Rivest, who was the R in RSA. And that was just, when he met him for the first time, we were just in awe. We were like, oh my gosh, this is amazing. Getting to interact with so many people who have shaped the security landscape. And after graduation, Drew and spent some time working on a cyber insurance project along with Luke, the other co-founder, and I
Mm-hmm.
spent some time working for the government. So my research areas were started off doing some work on reverse engineering tooling, so like decompilers, things like that, and then ended up on basically binary exploitation research. So the ways that people get hacked through like buffer overflows, heap overflows, things like that. How can they be defended against? And then in fact, it's much more fun to publish offensive papers than defensive papers. So I was actually poking holes in defensive systems that were proposed by other people. And through that experience, what I felt was a really interesting observation was that most teams and companies, they tend to, they're developing the software, and that's great. And then it's not until much later in the process that they're like, oh, okay, we should start thinking about security. We should buy some sort of product. Maybe it'll be like a firewall type thing that's going to inspect web traffic or something else that they're going to put into the application after it's already been developed. And that's okay, but if you look at what like the really leading tech companies do, like Google and Facebook, they've all invested heavily in stuff that runs inside your editor as you're writing the code for the first time, or like
Right.
as soon as you push the code, a few seconds later you get some automation that's like, hey, FYI, like the way you're using this API is like not so great. And the mission for us was, okay, if we think about these sorts of tools that exist internally at places like Google and Facebook, where a lot of our friends have been working, what can we do to bring them to the community and actually, make the community a part of our effort to do that? So the primary thing that we've been working on is actually a tool which was open sourced internally at Facebook years ago. The primary author of the tool actually joined R2C last year, and it just makes it really easy to, in the same kind of way that you might be like, oh wow, like there's this like .bad API call, and we should
Mm-hmm.
just grep the code base anytime somebody calls .bad API. One of the projects that we open sourced is this tool called semgrep, which is basically it's like grep, but it's actually aware of the structure of the code. So it won't be confused by white space or new lines or comments or anything like that. And our goal is really to partner with people from the community to kind of curate and get ideas on like, oh, okay, what are the sorts of things that it's totally fine and legal. This is like valid Python to write code this way.
Sure.
But if you're running a production web app, there are some gotchas in this framework that, like that code should just never make it to production. And we've been working with, people like Jacob Kaplan-Moss, who's one of the Django co-authors, for
Mm-hmm.
instance, He's been working with us a lot, actually. I think in collaboration with him, we've written close to 100 of these patterns for Django apps, for instance, that are basically just looking at, Django has awesome documentation. They have a whole book that gives you all this great advice about these are the sorts of things that you should do and you shouldn't do. But if you wanted to get that advice live, earlier on in the process, that's what we're trying to make facilities for. And our business model is to, SemGrep and those queries are free and open source, and providing commercial support and the sort of like enterprise dashboards and features that are uniquely valuable to an enterprise are the way that the company monetizes on top of those open source offerings.
Nice. And can you tell me a little bit about Bento? Is that what you were just talking about, or?
Yeah, so this SemGrep tool is still pretty fundamental, right? If you are a framework author or you maintain a package and you're like, oh my gosh, I deprecated this API, I wish people wouldn't use that, that's sort of the tool for you. But if you just want to get access to, hey, a lot of people are writing checks and R2C is trying to vet them and put them in an easy to use package, Bento is another open source project which is basically designed as for a developer who just wants to consume checks that other people have already written, make it really easy to set it up as like a pre-commit hook so that when you do a git commit, those checks automatically run. It can be run as a GitHub action or in your CI like Circle CI, and automatically leave comments on your pull request, for instance, basically being like, hey, like these are the sorts of issues that have been found. And it adds in like other niceties like, oh, it respects your git ignore, so it won't run on vendor code that you've checked in, for instance. And it also allows you to establish a baseline. So you can take a lot of the times if you've dealt with a linter like PyLint or Flake8, out of the box, they come with this config that has hundreds of errors. And it's like, oh my gosh, guys, could we just forget about all the things that are in the past and only consider this on new code going forward? And Bento has some great features that allow you to archive away all of the existing results and just do this on a commit by commit basis going forward. So it's sort of the get clean versus stay clean model, which a lot of bigger companies have adopted as well.
Nice. So as far as, building a business around, around this, like where are you guys at with that? I mean, you have stuff out in the wild. You guys generating revenue? Do you have, enterprise customers? Like what's your sort of target market, and where are you guys at in the process of commercializing?
Yeah, great question. So we've got a couple enterprise pilots going on, mainly with Silicon Valley SaaS companies that you've probably heard the names of, but we haven't driven any significant revenue from them yet. A big part of our goal is, as opposed to the sort of commercial static analysis security tools that are out there, those tools were mainly sold as like, hey, the security team buys this or the compliance team buys this. They were never really, even though they tried to sell to the developers didn't really embrace them. And so a big part of our belief is that if we're actually going to provide a service to the community, the core of the tool needs to be open. And so by having an open source project at the core of it, we just want to provide a platform for people to deliver best practices and recommendations, whether they be security or performance or otherwise, in an open source way, and make it easy to get started. So like a lot of our pilots have started because an engineer on the team is like, hey, like, wow, we have like 100 grep rules, and this SimGrep thing just seems like an obvious improvement over those. I'm going to start porting them over. So that is sort of the model that we're following. Like we want to get feedback from developers and from the community about like, hey, are these tools that we're providing useful? Would you actually, what sort of features would you need if you were to try to find bugs in your Python code base, or like hunt for deprecated or bad usage of APIs inside the code base?
Oh, very cool. I mean, getting customers is 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 it's an important step in every company's life, and obviously good luck with that. So where do you guys sort of like see? So where do you guys see yourself today, and where do you guys see yourselves going? Over the course of the next couple of quarters, couple of years.
Yeah, I think when we first started this project, we built something that was, basically like a MapReduce platform for static analysis. And it was great. And, like we had some like really like significant power users of that, especially from the academic side. We co-published with some universities at like Unix Security last year, for instance.
Mm-hmm.
But the problem was that it really, you needed a PhD, and in some cases, you needed beyond a PhD to really leverage those kind of tools.
Right. You
Um,
had to like write the tool.
right. I don't have a PhD, to be clear, but the people who were getting the most value out of them were like really, really sophisticated users. And our goal is really to make it simpler and easier for like if you have an idea and you're like, oh wow, like we should definitely write like a linter rule or like maybe some kind of static analysis to just like find this thing that I know it caused a bug in our application, and I would just like to prevent that from happening in the future.
Mm-hmm.
We've actually, we're doing things now that like you can write a query in a few minutes that last year would have taken us days. But we just want to drive down the difficulty of writing those sorts of rules and make it something that's really accessible for an average Python developer, so that if you make a mistake, you can automate away the same mistake and then share it with your team in the future. So that's sort of the answer in the Python side, is just like make things simpler. Um, and a more global perspective, we have a lot of AppSec teams who are really excited about this kind of stuff.
Mm-hmm.
And a lot of the times you're writing a modern web application. Yes, it's written in Python technically, but you've got like some Docker files, you've got like some AWS config files, maybe a little smattering of another language. So adding more multilingual support to the tooling. So Bento is pretty optimized for Python right now, but it has support for JavaScript, and we've also got Java and Golang in there. Improving support for those, as well as adding other languages like Ruby, Scala, basically to make sure that, if you're investing in figuring out how to use this kind of system, you can get value on all of your code base rather than just the Python parts, is another big part of what the upcoming year brings.
Very cool. So, part of the experience of being able to go to PyCon, and I probably should have asked you this before we, started recording, but have you been to a PyCon before, or have you been to local user group meetups?
So I've been to a lot of meetups. I've actually never made it to PyCon before, although I've had friends who've presented. So I
Next
was
year,
really looking
hopefully.
forward to it.
Fingers crossed.
Yeah.
Well, I was gonna say, one of the things that a lot of people look forward to about about being in the Python community in general is there's it's incredibly welcoming, and people are always there and ready to help. So like, besides having more folks like like use your software, what are some ways that the community can help you guys out right now?
That's a great question. I think if you have knowledge, if you're like a framework maintainer, we would love to talk to you. Like we've put in some like free work for other frameworks in terms of, oh, like you deprecated this API and you want to look at across all of PyPy, what percentage of people are still using that deprecated API, or could I just get rid of it, for instance? So I think like talking with framework maintainers and just kind of understanding, hey, like, are there ways in which our tools can be useful to you? What do those ways look like? That would be super valuable.
Nice.
And then for other people who like maybe working on a Python team, if you are interested in like doing some security scanning or compliance scanning on your Python code, check out the tools and give us some feedback. See if we're hitting close to the mark.
Nice. Are you guys are you guys hiring at the moment, or
Yeah, we
plan to
are
hire
hiring.
at some point?
Yep, we are hiring. Our number one need is people with program analysis expertise. So if you took classes in compilers, programming languages, program analysis, or like did work in that area, we would love to chat with you.
Excellent. And then where can people learn more about R2C?
Yeah, the best point is just r2c.dev. Pretty much everything is linked from there, and you can follow us on Twitter as well at r2cdev.
Excellent. Well, I wanted to thank you so much for taking the time to chat with me today. I hope that anybody who's tuned in to watch this reaches out and extends their support and assistance in whatever way that they're able to. And I wish you guys the absolute best of luck. And I hope to see you at the next PyCon,
Yeah,
whenever that is.
whenever that is. Well, thanks so much, Jason. And I know you're a volunteer doing this, so I really appreciate you carving out time from your busy schedule to really make the PyCon experience as excellent as it can be despite the circumstances.
Well, I try. Thank you so much. All righty.